The rejection. The night everything changed. ####, the moment that changed everything. Arya Blackthorn's hands shook as she arranged white roses in the grand ballroom. Each flower felt like a tiny knife cutting into her heart. Tonight, King Dominic Silvercrest would announce his engagement to Lady Serafina Goldwyn, the most beautiful Omega in 5 kingdoms. And Arya would watch from the shadows as she always did. She was used to being invisible. At 22, she worked as a healer's assistant in the royal palace, the lowest position an Omega could hold. Other Omegas had sweet scents like honey or vanilla. Arya smelled like storm clouds and midnight, a scent that made people uncomfortable. They called her cursed. They said something was broken inside her. But Arya had a secret that would destroy her if anyone knew. 3 months ago, during the Harvest Moon Festival, she had accidentally bumped into the king in a darkened hallway. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot through her body. Her wolf, usually silent and small, had roared to life with one word. Mate. King Dominic was her fated mate. The universe had chosen them for each other. But fate clearly had a cruel sense of humor, because there was no way a cursed Omega healer could ever be with the most powerful alpha in the land. ###, the scent that betrayed her. Arya, stop daydreaming and finish those arrangements, snapped Madame Claire, the head servant. The guests will arrive in 2 hours. Arya nodded quickly, trying to focus on her work. But her wolf was restless tonight, pacing inside her mind like a caged animal. Something felt wrong. The air tasted like copper and secrets. As she placed the last rose in its vase, a warm, spicy scent wrapped around her like invisible arms. Pine trees and leather and something wild that made her knees weak. She knew that scent. It belonged to him. "You there?" came a deep voice that sent shivers down her spine. "What's your name?" Arya turned slowly, keeping her eyes down as she'd been taught. King Dominic stood 10 feet away, breathtaking in his formal black suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his golden eyes held the kind of power that could make wolves bow without a single word. "Arya Blackthorn, your majesty," she whispered, her heart beating so fast she thought it might explode. He stepped closer, and she could feel his wolf pushing against hers through the invisible bond. Did he feel it too? Could he sense that they were meant to be together? "Blackthorn," he repeated slowly. "That's an old name. Are you from the Eastern Territories?" "Yes, your majesty. My family served the Silver Moon Pact before." She trailed off. Before her parents died in a mysterious fire when she was 10. Before she became an orphan with nowhere to go except the royal palace's servant quarters. Dominic moved even closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You smell different," he said quietly. "Like thunder and darkness. It's strange." Arya's cheeks burned with shame. "I'm sorry, your majesty. The healers say I'm defective. I didn't say it was bad." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "Just different." For one perfect moment, Arya let herself hope. Maybe he felt the bond. Maybe fate would win over duty and politics. Maybe. "Dominic, darling, there you are." A musical voice shattered the moment like glass breaking. Lady Serafina glided into the ballroom wearing a dress made of gold silk that probably cost more than Arya would earn in 10 years. Her blonde hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, and her scent of roses and honey filled the room sweet and cloying. She wrapped her arm possessively around Dominic's, marking her territory. Her blue eyes landed on Arya with the kind of disgust people reserved for insects they wanted to crush. "Who is this?" Serafina asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Just a servant," Dominic said, and the words hit Arya like a physical blow. His tone had gone cold and distant. The warmth from moments ago vanished completely. She was finishing the flower arrangements. "How lovely," Serafina said, though her eyes said the opposite. "The roses are beautiful. You may go now, girl." It was a dismissal, clear and cruel. Arya curtsied and fled the ballroom, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, she heard Serafina's laughter, light and pretty. The sound of someone who had never known what it felt like to be nothing. ###, the announcement that broke her. That night, Arya hid in the servants' gallery above the ballroom, watching through the carved wooden screens as hundreds of nobles celebrated below. She shouldn't be here. She should be in her tiny room, protecting her heart from more damage. But she couldn't look away, like watching a storm destroy everything you love. King Dominic stood on the raised platform, magnificent and untouchable. Serafina stood beside him, glowing with triumph. The elder council members surrounded them, smiling their approval. Elder Matthias, the most powerful council member, stepped forward. He was an ancient alpha with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. Everyone feared him, even the king. Tonight we celebrate not just a union of hearts, but a union of power, Matthias announced, his voice carrying through the room. King Dominic and Lady Serafina will join together, combining the strength of the Silvercrest line with the ancient magic of the Goldwyn family. Their children will be the most powerful alphas ever born. Arya's hands gripped the wooden screen so hard her knuckles turned white. Ancient magic? What did that mean? But before we finalize this blessed union, Matthias continued, and something in his tone made Arya's blood run cold, we must address a concerning matter that has come to our attention. The room fell silent. Dominic's face showed confusion, then concern. It has been discovered, Matthias said, his voice heavy with false regret, that our king has a fated mate already walking among us. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Arya stopped breathing. No, this couldn't be happening. This unfortunate bond was created by mistake, Matthias continued. A cosmic error that must be corrected. The mate in question is a lowly Omega with cursed blood, unsuitable in every way for our king. How did he know? Arya had told no one, spoken to no one. Unless, bring her forward, Matthias commanded. Guards appeared in the gallery where Arya hid. Their hands were rough as they grabbed her arms and dragged her down the stairs. She wanted to fight, to run, but her wolf had gone completely silent, curled up in terror. They threw her onto the marble floor at the base of the platform, right at Dominic's feet. The beautiful dress she'd been forced to wear, a simple gray thing that marked her as a servant, was now dirty and torn. No! She heard Dominic breathe above her. But was it horror at the situation or horror at her? Look up, Matthias commanded. Let the king see the face of his supposed mate. Arya raised her head slowly, her dark hair falling around her face. Her eyes met Dominic's golden ones, and she saw everything she needed to know. Shock, yes, but also disgust, disappointment, anger that fate had played such a cruel joke on him. The mate bond, which had been a quiet hum in her chest for 3 months, suddenly roared to life. It was as if the universe was forcing them both to acknowledge what they were to each other. Arya felt it wrapping around her heart, warm and golden and right. But Dominic's face went hard as stone. Is this true? Serafina demanded, her pretty face twisted with rage. You're bonded to this creature? The bond is meaningless, Dominic said, his voice loud and clear so everyone could hear. I reject it. ####, the rejection that changed everything. The words hit Arya like poison spreading through her veins. Rejection. The worst thing that could happen to a fated pair. When an alpha rejected their Omega, it broke something fundamental in both of them. But it hurt the Omega more, much more. Say the words, Matthias prompted, satisfaction gleaming in his cold eyes. Make it official. Dominic's jaw clenched. For a moment, just a moment, Arya saw something like pain flash across his face. Then it was gone, buried under duty and ambition and the weight of a crown. I, Dominic Silvercrest, Alpha King of the 5 Kingdoms, formally reject the mate bond with Arya Blackthorn, he said, and each word was a knife cutting into her soul. I choose my path freely without the chains of fate. The bond snapped. Arya screamed. She couldn't help it. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever imagined. It felt like her heart was being ripped from her chest while still beating. Her wolf howled in agony, a sound of pure loss and betrayal. She collapsed on the marble floor, her body shaking uncontrollably. Through the haze of pain, she heard Serafina's delighted laughter, and the murmur of nobles discussing her like she was an interesting show. Remove her from the palace, Matthias ordered. Take her to the Forbidden Wildlands and leave her there. If she survives, she'll know better than to return. The Wildlands, someone protested. That's a death sentence. Nothing survives out there. Exactly, Matthias said coldly. She's cursed blood. Better to let nature handle her than have her contaminate our kingdom further. Strong hands grabbed Arya again. Through tears and pain, she looked up one last time at Dominic. He stood rigid on the platform, his face carved from ice. He didn't look at her. Didn't acknowledge her pain. He had already moved on, already dismissed her from his life. But Serafina looked down at her, and for just a second, Arya saw something terrifying in those beautiful blue eyes. Not jealousy or anger but satisfaction. Like this was exactly what she'd wanted to happen. As the guards dragged Arya through the ballroom and out into the cold night, she heard the music start up again. The celebration continued. Her pain, her rejection, her destruction. It was just a small interruption in their perfect party. ##### Cast into darkness. The forbidden wildlands started where civilization ended. Ancient trees grew so thick that sunlight never reached the ground. Creatures that were neither fully wolf nor fully human hunted in the shadows. Rogues who had lost their minds lived there, killing anything that crossed their path. The guards threw Arya onto the hard ground just past the boundary markers. "Good luck, cursed one," one of them said, not unkindly. "You'll need it." Then they were gone and Arya was alone. The rejection pain still burned through her body like acid. She could barely breathe, barely think. Her wolf was silent, possibly dying from the severed bond. Everything hurt. She crawled forward, not knowing where she was going, just knowing she had to move. Had to survive. Even though part of her wanted to lie down and let the darkness take her. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Time lost meaning when everything was pain. She didn't notice when the shadows around her started moving with purpose. Didn't realize she was being watched until a low growl made her freeze. A massive wolf emerged from the darkness. His fur was pure black, darker than midnight, and his eyes glowed silver instead of gold. He was bigger than any alpha she'd ever seen, radiating power that felt ancient and dangerous. Arya tried to move to defend herself, but her body wouldn't cooperate. This was it. After surviving rejection, she would die in these cursed woods. But the black wolf didn't attack. Instead, he shifted into human form, revealing a man with dark skin and those same silver eyes. He was perhaps 30, with scars crossing his muscular chest and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "Well," he said, his voice deep and rough from disuse. "This is interesting. A rejected Omega who smells like a storm. What are you really, little one?" "Dying," Arya whispered through cracked lips. He knelt beside her, studying her with those unsettling silver eyes. "No, you're not dying. You're transforming. That cursed blood everyone talks about? It's not a curse at all." He placed his hand on her forehead, and cool relief flooded through her body, easing some of the rejection pain. "My name is Kale Nightshade," he said. "And I'm going to tell you what you really are, Arya Blackthorn. You're not a weak, defective Omega. You're a Shadow Alpha. One of the ancient bloodlines that were supposedly wiped out centuries ago because people feared their power." Arya's eyes widened. Shadow Alpha? She'd heard whispers of them in old stories. Wolves who could manipulate darkness itself, who were immune to normal Alpha commands, who could challenge any wolf regardless of rank. "That's impossible," she breathed. "They're just legends." Kale smiled, and it transformed his harsh face into something almost kind. "So are rejected Omegas who survive in the forbidden wildlands. Yet here you are, alive when you should be dead." He stood, offering his hand. "The king made a mistake tonight, little storm. He chose a crown over his mate, power over love, duty over destiny. But his loss will become your strength." Arya looked at his outstretched hand. She could stay here and die, destroyed by rejection and betrayal. Or she could take his hand and discover what she might become. Her wolf, silent for so long, stirred. Not weak anymore, but angry. Furious at being rejected, cast aside, called defective and cursed. That anger felt clean and hot and powerful. Arya placed her hand in Kale's and let him pull her to her feet. "Teach me," she said, her voice stronger now. "Teach me what I really am. Teach me how to make them regret throwing me away." Kale's smile grew wider, showing teeth that looked too sharp to be entirely human. "Oh, little storm, it will be my absolute pleasure. By the time we're done, That king of yours will realize his crown means nothing compared to what he lost. And when you return to that palace, you won't be crawling back begging for scraps. His silver eyes gleamed with promises of power and revenge. You'll be returning as a queen. A shadow queen. And they will all bow before you or burn. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the dark sky. And Arya Blackthorn, broken and rejected and thrown away, smiled for the first time since her mate had destroyed her. The real story was just beginning. End of part 1. Part 2. The transformation. Rising from the ashes. The hidden sanctuary. Arya woke to the smell of herbs and wood smoke. Her body still ached from the rejection, but the sharp stabbing pain had faded to a dull throb. She lay on a soft bed covered in dark furs, in a room carved from living rock. Candles flickered in alcoves, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You've been sleeping for 3 days, Kale's voice came from the doorway. He carried a tray with steaming soup and dark bread. Your body needed time to start healing from the rejection. Most don't survive the first night. Arya sat up slowly, accepting the food with shaking hands. The soup tasted like nothing she'd ever had before. Rich and warming, with herbs that seemed to chase away the cold that had settled in her bones. Where are we? She asked, looking around the strange room. The sanctuary, Kale replied, settling into a chair carved from twisted roots. A place built centuries ago by the Shadow Alphas when they were hunted. It exists between the physical world and the Shadow Realm. Unless you know how to look for it, you'll never find it. Through the doorway, Arya could see other rooms, other people moving about. She heard voices, laughter, the sound of training weapons clashing together. How many people live here? 43, Kale said. All rejected, all cast out, all thought to be dead. Some are shadow alphas like you and me. Others are wolves who discovered uncomfortable truths about the royal families and needed to disappear. A few are rogues who kept their sanity when others lost theirs. Arya finished her soup, feeling strength slowly returning to her limbs. You said I'm a shadow alpha, but I've never shown any special abilities. I couldn't even shift properly until recently. How can I be something so powerful? Kale's silver eyes studied her carefully. Tell me about your parents, Arya. What do you remember? The question brought painful memories flooding back. They died when I was 10. There was a fire at our home in the Eastern Territories. The pack said it was an accident, but... She paused, remembering things she'd tried to forget. My mother acted strange the week before. Scared. She kept telling me to hide my scent, to never let anyone know what I truly was. I didn't understand then. Your mother was trying to protect you, Kale said gently, because she knew what you were even if you didn't. Shadow Alpha abilities don't fully emerge until after a major trauma. The fire that killed your parents should have killed you too. But you survived. And then you buried your power deep inside, hiding it even from yourself. Arya's hands trembled. Are you saying my parents were murdered because of what I am? I'm saying that certain people have been hunting Shadow Alpha bloodlines for 200 years, trying to wipe us out completely. Kale leaned forward, his expression intense. And I believe the same people who killed your parents are the ones who orchestrated your rejection by King Dominic. The words hung in the air like poison. Elder Matthias, Arya whispered, pieces clicking together in her mind. He knew about the mate bond. He's the one who exposed me publicly. But how did he know? Because Lady Seraphina told him. Kale pulled out a worn leather journal from his coat. I've been investigating the Goldwyn family for 5 years. Seraphina isn't just a pretty noble. She's a dark witch who's been using blood magic to manipulate the royal court. Arya's stomach turned cold. Blood magic is forbidden. If she's been caught, she won't be caught because Elder Matthias is protecting her. They're working together. Kale opened the journal, showing pages filled with notes and drawings. Matthias has been eliminating anyone who might threaten his control over the throne. Your parents were on a list of Shadow Alpha families to be destroyed. And when he discovered you were Dominic's fated mate, you became a threat that had to be removed. Rage, hot and pure, flooded through Arya's body. They killed my parents. They destroyed my life. They made the king reject me. All to maintain their power. Yes. Kale's voice was soft but firm. And they'll keep doing it until someone stops them. The question is, will that someone be you? #### training begins. Arya stood in the training circle the next morning, facing Kale across smooth stone. Around them, other sanctuary members gathered to watch. She could feel their curiosity, their doubt. A rejected Omega who claimed to be a Shadow Alpha? They'd believe it when they saw it. Forget everything you think you know about being Omega, Kale instructed. The hierarchy Alpha, Beta, Omega is a lie created to keep certain bloodlines in power. Shadow Alphas exist outside that system. We don't submit to Alpha commands. We command the shadows themselves. I don't know how, Arya admitted, frustration making her voice sharp. You do. You've been doing it your whole life without realizing it. Kale gestured to the shadows pooling at their feet. How do you think you stayed hidden so well as a servant? How did you always seem to disappear when trouble came? You were instinctively using shadow walking. Arya thought about all the time she'd seemed to vanish in plain sight, how she could move through the palace without being noticed. She'd thought she was just forgettable, invisible. But what if it had been something else? Close your eyes, Kale commanded. Feel the darkness around you. It's not empty space. It's alive, waiting for your call. Arya closed her eyes and reached out with senses she'd never known she had. First nothing. Then slowly she felt it. A cool presence wrapping around her like silk. The shadows were aware of her, responding to her attention. Good. Kale's voice came from her right. Now, without opening your eyes, tell me where I am. Arya focused on the shadows. They showed her everything. Kale standing 5 feet away. 3 other people watching from the left. A bird flying overhead. The shadows painted a picture in her mind more detailed than sight alone could provide. You're to my right, she said. Moving closer. Excellent. Now move through the shadows. Step into darkness here and emerge from darkness there. Sounded impossible. But Arya remembered her mother's words from long ago. We are born from darkness, little star. Never fear it. She took a step forward, pulling the shadows around her like a cloak. For a moment, the world went completely black and silent. Then she emerged 10 feet away from where she'd started, behind Kale. The watching crowd gasped. Kale turned, a proud smile crossing his usually stern face. There she is. The Shadow Alpha awakens. Over the following weeks, Arya trained harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She learned to move through shadows, to listen to darkness, to call shadow weapons that could cut through steel. She discovered she could cloak her scent completely, or change it to whatever she wanted. She could command any wolf below Alpha rank with just a thought. And even Alphas struggled to resist her power. But more importantly, she learned to fight. Not the submissive defense she'd been taught as an Omega, but true combat. Kale was merciless, pushing her past exhaustion, past pain, past the point where she wanted to quit. They won't show mercy, he'd say as she struggled to stand after another brutal session. So I won't either. At night, she studied everything Kale had discovered about Matthias and Seraphina. The elder had been consolidating power for decades, removing anyone who questioned him. Seraphina had been promised ultimate power in exchange for using her dark magic to keep Dominic under control. The blood magic she's using requires a source, Kale explained one evening. She's draining it from somewhere or someone. If we can find that source and cut it off, her power will collapse. Arya studied the journal entries, noting patterns. She visits the old cathedral ruins every new moon. Alone. What if that's where her power source is hidden? Kale looked impressed. Smart. The cathedral was built on an ancient convergence point. Perfect for dark magic. His expression grew serious. But if we're right, that means she's probably using blood sacrifices. We need to stop her before the next new moon. That's in 2 weeks, Arya said, feeling cold certainty settle over her. And the new moon falls on the king's coronation anniversary, the biggest celebration of the year, when the entire court will be distracted and vulnerable. Kale nodded slowly. Arya, I think Seraphina and Matthias are planning something big. Something that will cement their control over the kingdom permanently. ### the dark conspiracy. Arya spent the next week gathering information through methods she'd learned at the sanctuary. She could shadow walk into the palace now, invisible and undetectable, listening to conversations no one knew she heard. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Serafina wasn't just using dark magic to influence Dominic. She was slowly poisoning him with a curse that would eventually kill him, leaving the throne empty for Matthias to claim through the council's authority. The coronation anniversary celebration would be the final step. Serafina planned to complete a blood ritual that would transfer all of Dominic's alpha power to herself, making her the most powerful wolf alive. She'll be unstoppable, Arya told the Sanctuary Council, laying out maps of the palace and cathedral. Once she absorbs his power, she can challenge any alpha. Matthias will use her as his weapon to conquer the other 4 kingdoms. Then we stop the ritual, said Marcus, a grizzled shadow alpha who'd been fighting this war for 20 years. Kill them both before they can complete it. No, Arya said firmly, surprising herself with her confidence. Killing them makes them martyrs. We need to expose them, show the entire kingdom what they truly are. Only then will we break their power completely. Kale studied her with those silver eyes. You have a plan. It wasn't a question. Arya smiled, and it felt dangerous and right. I do. But it requires me to return to the palace. Return to him. The words hung heavy in the air. Returning to Dominic meant facing the mate who had rejected her, the man whose choice had almost killed her. It meant risking her heart as well as her life. Are you ready for that? Kale asked quietly. Arya thought about the girl she'd been 3 months ago. Small, scared, convinced she was defective and worthless. That girl was gone, burned away by rejection and reborn in shadow and fury. He chose his crown over me, she said, her voice steady and cold. Now I'll show him what that choice cost. I'm not going back as his rejected mate, begging for scraps. I'm going back as something he'll never expect. She stood, moving to the window where moonlight painted silver patterns on the floor. The coronation celebration is in 1 week. I need to be ready. You will be, Kale promised. By the time we're done, you'll be powerful enough to make kings kneel and kingdoms tremble. #### the growing storm. While Arya trained, Dominic's kingdom began to fall apart in ways no one could explain. Trade routes were disrupted by shadow creatures no one could catch. Nobles reported nightmares that left them exhausted and afraid. Sickness spread through the palace, a strange weakness that healers couldn't cure. Arya listened to reports with satisfaction. She wasn't causing these problems directly, but her growing power was affecting the kingdom in subtle ways. The land itself rejected the corruption growing at its heart. In the palace, Dominic paced his chambers like a caged wolf. Something was wrong, but he couldn't identify what. He felt weaker each day, drained of energy. Serafina assured him it was stress, that he needed to rest more. But instinct screamed that something darker was happening. Late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, he thought about her. The Omega girl he'd rejected, the one with storm cloud eyes and midnight scent. He'd thought about her every day since that terrible night, remembered the look of betrayal and pain on her face. Sometimes he wondered if she'd survived the wildlands. Probably not. Nothing survived out there. The thought should have brought relief, one less complication to worry about. Instead, it felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. A constant ache in his chest where the severed mate bond used to be. You're thinking about her again, Serafina said from the doorway, making him jump. She wore a nightgown of sheer silk, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like every man's dream, but Dominic felt nothing when he looked at her. I'm thinking about the kingdom, he lied. Serafina moved closer, running her hand down his arm. Her touch felt wrong somehow, too hot, almost burning. The kingdom needs you strong, my love. Our wedding is in 2 months. After that, everything will be better. But Dominic noticed how her eyes gleamed with something that looked like hunger. How her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Small details he'd been ignoring for months because he'd wanted so badly to believe he'd made the right choice. Serafina, he said slowly, do you know what happened to the Omega girl? Arya Blackthorn. Her expression flickered, just for a moment, with something dark and satisfied. She's dead, darling. The Wildlands took her as they take everyone. Why do you care about a cursed servant girl? I don't, Dominic said, but the lie tasted bitter on his tongue. ### the return decision. On the night before the coronation celebration, Arya stood before a mirror in her chambers at the sanctuary. The woman looking back at her was barely recognizable. She'd always been pretty in a plain way, but now she was striking. Her dark hair fell in midnight waves past her shoulders. Her eyes, once dull gray, now gleamed with silver light. Her body, strengthened by training, moved with predatory grace. She wore a dress of deep purple silk that shifted to black in the shadows. It was cut to emphasize her curves while allowing easy movement. Silver jewelry adorned her throat and wrists, not decorative but weapons disguised as beauty. "You look like a queen," Kale said from behind her. "A dangerous one." Arya smiled at her reflection. "Good. That's exactly what I need to be." She turned to face him, this man who had saved her life and taught her to embrace her power. "Thank you, Kale. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," he said seriously. "What you're about to do is incredibly dangerous. Serafina will recognize you the moment you enter the palace, even with your new appearance. And Dominic." He paused. "The mate bond is severed, but the attraction might still be there. Can you face him without falling apart?" Arya thought about the question carefully. Did she still love Dominic? The Omega girl she'd been would have said yes, would have forgiven him anything for one kind word. But that girl was dead, destroyed by rejection and reborn as something stronger. "I don't love him anymore," she said, and realized it was true. "What I feel now is complicated. Part of me wants him to suffer the way I suffered. Part of me wants him to see what he threw away. But I don't want him back. That version of me who needed his acceptance died in the wildlands." "Good," Kale said approvingly. "Love makes you weak. Anger makes you strong." But as Arya prepared to shadow walk to the palace, she wondered if that was entirely true. Maybe love didn't make you weak. Maybe it was choosing the wrong things to love that destroyed you. Dominic had loved his crown more than his mate. Serafina loved power more than truth. Matthias loved control more than justice. Arya loved herself now. Loved the strength she'd found in darkness. Loved the truth that had set her free from chains she hadn't known she wore. And she would use that love to burn down everything false and corrupt, leaving room for something new to grow. "I'm ready," she said, pulling shadows around her like a cloak. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember, you're not fighting alone. We'll be in position waiting for your signal. When the time comes, the sanctuary warriors will be there." Arya nodded. Then she stepped into darkness and disappeared, traveling through shadows toward the palace where her story had ended and her revenge would begin. In his chambers, Dominic felt a sudden chill run down his spine. His wolf, silent and subdued for months, suddenly lifted its head and howled, not in pain but in recognition. Something was coming. Something powerful and familiar and absolutely terrifying. Outside, storm clouds gathered in an impossibly clear sky, and thunder rumbled a warning that no one heeded. The rejected Omega was returning. But she wasn't coming back to beg forgiveness. She was coming back to claim what was rightfully hers, and heaven help anyone who stood in her way.